Hi, hello everybody. Thanks for coming in and joining the talk. My name is Dr. Rebecca Wershba. I'm a clinical psychologist with a focus in neuropsychology and the founder of Boston Metro Neuropsychology. The two things that I do are neuropsychological assessment, which means that I help people figure out how their brain and body work together. In terms of emotions and thinking skills and the behaviors that people do and how it affects them. The other thing that I focus on is sleep therapy. So for people who have problems with insomnia, meaning that they chronically over time have problems being able to sleep. They have problems falling asleep.
I listen, but
and
I'm
they have
not sure
problems
what I
staying
get.
asleep. And can everybody hear me okay? This might be a good time
I
to
don't know
check in.
how. I am stupidly doing.
Can anybody use their chat to let me know if they can hear me and if I'm speaking into a void? Let's see. All right, y'all hear me. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay. As I go on, by the way, you might end up having some questions. Please feel free to write in any questions. I'm going to get to all of them at the end. Like I said, the things that I focus on are assessment and sleep therapy. So when people have problems falling asleep or when people have problems staying asleep, then I work with them to figure out how they can modify their behavior and modify the way that they think so that they can get a good night's sleep. I do that using cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is something that psychologists, cognitive behavioral therapy is something that psychologists use for things like anxiety and depression, but they can also use it to focus on sleep. Today, what we're going to be talking about is how to, there we go. Oh, goodness. All right. Boy, that went quickly. All right, that was a quick presentation. Today, what we're going to be focusing on is sleep and mood. That's especially relevant right now as we're heading into winter and as we're going to be approaching daylight savings time. So people probably know that if you have bad sleep for a night, that can make you cranky, it can make you irritable. You're just not at the top of your game for a night and your emotions probably aren't so great, and then you rally. Usually a few hours later you notice that you feel a little bit better once you forget about your bad night's sleep, but for at least for a little while things can be pretty rough. The problem starts to become when you have bad sleep chronically, meaning you're always having problems with sleep. You're always going to sleep late. You're always waking up in the middle of the night. And that can start to lead to some real problems, like problems with depression or problems with anxiety or other sorts of mood problems. If you have chronic insomnia, you actually have 5 times more likely of a chance to develop a problem like depression, and up to 20 times more likely to develop some certain problems like panic disorder, which is a kind of anxiety disorder. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The way that your body works, basically, is that it can also work kind of in a terrible feedback loop. So once you have problems with anxiety or depression, that can unfortunately lead you to have bad sleep. When somebody has a problem like anxiety or they have a problem like depression, what it can actually do is change the way that you think about things. So for people who have had bad sleep, hopefully just for a night, when something's bothering you and you can't sleep for a night, you might notice that your thoughts tend to kind of ruminate, is the word for it, where you basically think about the same thing over and over and over. So maybe if you have anxiety, you're worrying about what's going to be happening tomorrow or what's going to be happening next week. Maybe if you're having thoughts that are depressed, you're worrying or you're thinking about the things that already happened, the things that made you sad. But your mind goes and goes and goes and goes, and that keeps you awake. The other thing is that problems with anxiety and depression actually affect your body. It affects your physical body. So the way we evolved is that and this is a little bit of a simplification, so bear with me, but the way we evolved was that if there's something that is a stressor, something that you're afraid of. Your body has one reaction, which is to figure out that this thing is going to kill you and you need to respond appropriately. Your body, and again, an oversimplification, responds the same way to a bad day at work or a presentation as it responds to seeing a bear coming and about to maul you. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart starts racing, your hands turn damp and clammy because all the blood goes out of your hands and it goes to your arms. And to your legs because you need to start running, and when the bear mauls you, you need to pull your arm back and not bleed. Your pupils dilate, your stomach feels sick because your body doesn't want to put the energy into your belly anymore. It wants to put the energy where it needs to go, which is fighting or fleeing. That works really well when it's a bear because the problem is over in a few minutes. Either you're running away or you're, getting eaten by a bear. The problem is that when this is chronic, when you're always under stress, your body develops that high blood pressure, that heart rate, those racing thoughts that can keep you from sleeping. So that's all to say that it's important, especially as we're going to be going into the winter, to make sure that we're doing what we can to manage our sleep, to help our mood. And the flip side of that, to try to manage our mood so that we can help our sleep. Now today, when I'm talking about these things, I'm not going to be I'm not going to be diagnosing anybody or making any sorts of I'll be giving some kind of tips about how we can do that. But being able to solve problems like anxiety or depression, or even solve poor sleep, is going to be beyond the scope of this talk. But I'll be happy to answer some questions near the end. So to understand a little bit more about what's going to be shifting as we move into the winter and what's going to be shifting through daylight savings time, I want to talk a little bit about our circadian rhythm. Now, it's probably clear that I'm a psychologist and not a designer, but y'all are going to bear with me anyways, and I appreciate that. So the circadian rhythm is something that helps our body know when we're supposed to be asleep and when we're supposed to be awake. If you went into a dark cave and stayed there for a week, you would still pretty much sleep at the same time of night, be awake during the same time of day that you are normally. And that's, without anything telling you when you should be awake or asleep. And part of that is because your body lets you know. One of the things that shifts over the course of the day is your body temperature. And that's one of the things that lets your body know when it's time to sleep. So this is just showing you that normally as the day goes on, during the times that you're most alert, your body temperature is at its highest, and then it always goes down. So let's say that you're the kind of person who sleeps from 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Well, that would be the dream. But during that time that your body temperature is lowest is the time that you generally fall asleep. So what happens if you travel? What happens if you head to California? Also the dream as we move into winter. Well, this is your body temperature still, but now we're changing. This is everybody else's body temperature. This is what everybody else, this is the time that everybody else is going to sleep and staying awake. So around the time that it's 9 o'clock, the time that you are going to be going to bed, the time right here, the time that you're exhausted, that you're planning to fall asleep. Maybe I went the wrong way in time. Around that time, everybody else is still, so your body temperature, there we go, is saying that it's 9 o'clock. And you're not going to be sleepy until right around here, a few hours later, because your body temperature is out of sync from what everybody else is dealing with right now. Now, as we head into daylight savings time, we're going to be in the same sort of situation, which is we're going to be off 1 hour. So your body is going to be saying, hey, it's time for me to go to sleep, or it's time for me to wake up. But the clock is saying something different. And as we change, even outside, the sky is going to be different. The world is going to be telling you something different than what your body is expecting. And that can throw people off. One of the things that it can do is it can stimulate seasonal affective disorder, which is what we're going to be talking about. All right. Let's see if I can move to the next slide. Fantastic. So as we head into winter, there's going to be a few things that are going to be working against us in terms of our mood and in terms of sleep. So the main thing is that in the winter, and you've all already started to notice, is that we're having less sunlight during the day. So there's a few things that happens. One is that, as I said, your circadian rhythm moves, just continues on its own without any sort of influence. If there's no sun, if there's no nothing, your circadian rhythm just kind of keeps going. But we're not in that world. We're not just living in a cave. We're living in a world where we see sun sometimes, and those are things that affect our circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm very much changes depending on when we see sun and when we see light. So now that there's less sunlight, that circadian rhythm is going to be a little bit disrupted. So we might have some more problems falling asleep or staying asleep. The other things that it'll do is it'll reduce our serotonin. Serotonin is a hormone in our brain that basically tells us to relax. It tells us to be calm. People with problems with anxiety or depression will often use some medication that affects their serotonin, that either brings more serotonin into their brain or makes it easier for their brain to suck up the serotonin and use it effectively. But when there's less sunlight, we actually see a drop in serotonin. The other thing we're going to see is a drop in melatonin. So a lot of people who have problems with sleep use over-the-counter melatonin as something to help them stimulate their sleep. It's always a good idea to talk to your doctor, by the way, before you do that, because there's more effective ways to use melatonin. So sometimes people just kind of pop a pill before they go to sleep. If that works for you, fantastic. Sometimes a doctor can make a recommendation about the right dose for you or the right time to use it to make your sleep the best. But again, reduced sunlight is going to have a drop in melatonin. The other thing, again, today is just, unless something has changed in the last hour, today is just a gray and gloomy day. And gray and gloomy days just aren't fantastic for your mood. And as we're going into winter, we're just going to be having more gray and gloomy days. Those of us with small kids are going to be looking forward to trying to cram our small kids into snowsuits, and that's not an exciting and fun thing. There's just less fun things to do. And there's also just, the change in daylight savings time. It's going to be darker in the morning. There's nothing fun about waking up in the morning because your alarm clock has gone off and looking outside and it's pitch black. Winter is not a good time of year for a lot of people for all of these reasons. So there are all of these things that are biologically causing your sleep to not be as good as it was, and biological things that are happening to affect your mood inside of your brain and inside of your body. And then there's just also kind of the emotional, discomfort of having things be dark all the time, having things be cold, all of February, for example. So there's a lot of things that can affect your mood, and that brings us into the question of seasonal affective disorder. Seasonal affective disorder is basically depression. These are going to be some of the symptoms, and I'll go over some of these with you, but these are going to be some of the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder, and you're going to notice that a lot of them are the exact same symptoms that you would have for major depressive disorder. There's no real difference between them, except that seasonal affective disorder is something that affects some people, which is that they always or almost always get depressed around the winter. So around this time, around the time that everything starts getting cold and gloomy, that's around the time that they start to feel moody and sad. As I said, everybody can get a little bit moody or sad, but for some people, it's not just kind of, a gray blob that moves on. For some people, this becomes something that's extremely bothersome. Some people kind of have a double whammy, which is that maybe they're already prone to being depressed or already prone to being anxious. And then winter is just an extra punch in the face. And those are people who can have two forms of depression at the same time. So again, everybody kind of has flaws. It's something to start to notice and get worried about when you start to feel depressed most of the day, almost every day. If you're feeling a little bit down here and there, you know, there are a lot of things that you can do to pick yourself up. If you're feeling down all the time, this might be the time that that you should start thinking about trying to make some changes. Losing interest in activities you once enjoyed, you know, and not just because it's cold outside, but I don't, you know, I usually like to read, but now I just kind of want to stare at the wall. I don't have the energy to get up and move. I don't really want to go anywhere. I'm sleeping too much, or I'm sleeping too little, or I'm waking up in the middle of the night and can't fall back asleep. Here at the end, I talk about oversleeping. Oversleeping is something that is more common during the winter. So for people who just generally have depression, lots of times you could have problems oversleeping or not being able to sleep. Being in bed all the time and not feeling alert and awake anyways is something that's more common for people with seasonal affective disorder. Those winter kind of, the winter gloom that doesn't lift. Changes in appetite or weight. This can go both ways. Either you're hungry all the time and you're just kind of eating and eating and eating and snacking, especially carbohydrates, which we're going to jump down here. Carbohydrates, which just kind of tell your body that it's time to, you know, go into the closet and not come out for a season. Or not being hungry at all, no appetite, not wanting to eat, feeling sluggish, you don't want to move, moving all the time, problems with focus. I start to worry when someone's feeling hopeless or worthless or guilty. These are the kinds of thoughts that that can really kind of show that there's something going on. These are red flags to me. This is telling me if somebody's feeling like things are never going to get better. Those are ways of thinking that are particularly problematic for people. And I have this italicized. If you're having frequent thoughts about death or suicide, and I want to be clear that having thoughts like that, a lot of people have thoughts like that. That doesn't mean that you're going to go off and kill yourself because you have thoughts like that. But to me, that's a big red flag. Thoughts like that to me are your brain saying, hey, something's wrong here. We need to do something. We need to do something to try to make a change, because those sorts of thoughts aren't you living your best life if you're having thoughts like that. So take a look at this list and, you know, also, you know, do your own research, look it up online. If you start to notice these kinds of problems, either related to the change in time, related to seasonal affective disorder, related to the time change, which, by the way, the time change, people, after the time change, people start to have, for like a week or two, people start to have, people have more health problems, there are more heart attacks, more people check themselves into psychiatric hospitals. All evidence that changing the clock by an hour isn't really doing us a whole lot of favors. But if you notice these problems, even if you're not noticing these problems now, please just kind of keep them in the back of your mind for yourself or for your friends or family. We don't want our thoughts to get to this point. It's better if we can, you know, say, hey, I'm starting to notice some of these things. Maybe now is the time for me to make some changes. So what can we do about these things? A lot of these things are going to be helpful whether we're talking about kind of just the winter blahs. You don't have to be depressed or to feel bad all the time to want to feel better and to feel at your best. So one thing we can do, just, you know, we can get ahead of daylight savings time now. We can start to, you know, knowing when it is, a few days before, a week before, we can start to prep by going to bed a little bit later. This is actually the easier direction. It's easier to stay up an extra hour than to try to force yourself to fall asleep an hour earlier, but it's still not easy. So we can just start to prep for that, to try to avoid, you know, the kind of body changes that we might have by going to bed a little bit earlier. One of the big things is to get as much sun as you can. We're going to be getting less sun in the winter, and that's just a bummer. It's gray, it's cloudy, it's terrible. But as much as you can, get the sun that you can. Again, what sun does, in addition to vitamin D, which is fantastic, and y'all should probably be taking vitamin D this winter, because you get that from the sun. So take a little bit of extra vitamin D just to keep your mood up, just to keep yourself healthy. But being out in the sun is something that tells your circadian rhythm, that tells your body, all right, now it's daytime, now it's nighttime. It helps you be alert when you're supposed to be alert. It helps you go to sleep when you're supposed to sleep. And it makes you feel better during the day. So go out and get walks if you can. If you're working out of your basement like I am, if there's any windows, try to be near windows. Try to go outside a little bit, especially if you see the sun. Try to get as much natural light as you can. Another thing that you can do, especially if you're prone to seasonal affective disorder, is to use a light box. What a light box does is that it stimulates the kind of natural light that you experience when you're outside on a sunny day. So that natural light, in addition to just kind of lighting up the room, is something that goes straight to your brain and stimulates those hormones we were talking about. It straight up just tells your body it's sunlight, it's time, like, let's make some serotonin, let's get our melatonin on track. Use a light box. Your doctor may be able to make some recommendations. You can look on Amazon and just look for a light box that says that it's good for seasonal affective disorder. But you can talk to your doctor, who may have some recommendations about whether it'll be especially useful for you. Now, just a brief caveat, if you have certain problems that affect your sleep, like bipolar disorder or certain seizure disorders or things like that, talk to your doctor first, because light boxes can, if you have bipolar disorder, for example, it might push you into a manic episode. You don't want that. So always a good idea to just kind of check that with your doctor. One thing that you can do is everything that you can to try to just get your sleep on track. So like I said, one of the things that I do is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And what that does is it teaches people, first of all, how to change the way that they think about things that are keeping them awake or waking them up in the middle of the night. It teaches people when to go to bed and when to wake up, but it also teaches people how to make their environment good for sleep. So things that would be considered good sleep hygiene would be, being in a room that's not too hot, leaving your bedroom just for sleep. Sleep and sex, but you're not, just hanging out in your bedroom all day long, because you want your brain to say, hey, it's time for me to go to bed. I am in bed. That means it's time for sleep. That also means no electronics in bed, no watching movies in bed. So one fun fact is when you use your phone in bed, because we all use our phone in bed, we all watch movies in bed, we all do those things that we're not supposed to be doing. The light from a phone, the light from electronics, stimulates your brain in the same way that a light box stimulates your brain. It tells you that it's daytime. It tells you that it's time to be up. It's time to be energetic. Awesome during the day when you're using a light box. Bad when it's nighttime. It's 11 o'clock. You're supposed to be asleep, and a bright light is coming out of your phone telling you that it is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Get up, do stuff, turn your brain on. So part of good sleep hygiene will involve not using electronics, keeping your bed, again, just for sleep and sex. The better your sleep, the better your mood is going to be. Because again, as I said, if your sleep is chronically bad, it's likely going to affect your mood. What if you've done all these things? Or what if you even haven't done all these things, but you feel like you need an extra boost? Talk to a therapist. Especially if you're having those thoughts of hopelessness, if you're having thoughts about hurting yourself or killing yourself, or if you're even having thoughts just in your head, maybe things would be better off if I weren't here. That's just, again, that's your brain saying, hey, something's not working for me right now. There might be a better way to be. Talking to a therapist, I think a lot of people kind of have this idea, like this kind of old school idea, that you're going to go to a therapist and you're going to lie down on a couch and you're going to talk about your parents all day long. And that is not what that's not what therapy should be. And I think that's not what you would be doing with most therapists. If you're having those kinds of problems with mood, then talking to a therapist can help you figure out what, if any, the changes you can make in your day-to-day life to kind of boost your mood, how you can change the way that you're thinking about things to so that you're kind of interpreting things in a way that's helpful. And a therapist can also help you with your sleep if you're having problems with sleep. Talking to a therapist doesn't mean that you have to talk to a therapist for the next few years. For something like CBT for insomnia, usually it's 4 or 5 sessions only, and that's it. For other problems with depression or anxiety, maybe you'll find it helpful to do it a little bit longer, but it's something that you can give a try. The other side of that is you can also just talk to your doctor. For a lot of people, medication is helpful. You know, just getting that extra boost of serotonin. Again, a lot of people think, I don't want to have to, you know, be tied to drugs my whole life. A lot of people use medication for just an extra boost just during these winter months. Your doctor will be in a good position to tell you whether they think that that'll be something that might be helpful for you, and you can try. For me, using medication is basically like a hypothesis. You know, let's give it a try and see if anything changes. Doesn't mean you're weak, doesn't mean that, you know, you're broken, doesn't mean that it's something you have to do for the rest of your life to make your brain, you know, work. It just means that if you're having these sorts of thoughts, then maybe you're not living, you know, your best life. Maybe you're not having the quality of life that you wish you would have. Talking to a therapist, talking to a doctor, those are all things that can help. Other things that might help, exercise, meditation. These are all things that have been shown through research to help your mood and to help your sleep. I think we're just about done with the talk part of this. Thank you everybody for listening. I'm going to be sticking around to answer any questions. So again, this is me. I'm going to see if I can figure out how chat works. And I'm going to move through, let's see. Let me see if I can find chat. Here we go. So the last I saw was that everybody can hear me. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to just put it in the chat. Let me know if you have any questions about seasonal affective disorder, any questions about insomnia, any questions about, you know, how to know whether you're having the blahs versus depression. That was just a question about whether CBT can work for kids in their teens with a long-standing history of poor sleep. Absolutely. So CBT for insomnia, again, there's a lot of different aspects of it. And so this particular kind of sleep therapy, which is again usually pretty time limited, focuses on a few different things. So one thing is to figure out what in your environment isn't working for you. So sometimes, you know, you'll find that people are staying in bed, you know, that they're spending 2 hours before they go to sleep in bed on their phones. And, you know, they're sleeping in until noon on the weekends and trying to get up at 6 o'clock during the weekday. And sometimes it's as easy as just figuring out these patterns and figuring out a better way to modify your sleep that can be helpful. For just about anybody, just taking a look at that will be helpful. And that's something that you can do in therapy, either with somebody who specifically does CBT for insomnia, or even any therapist hopefully should be able to do that. The other things that it teaches is relaxation techniques, basically deep breathing, something called guided meditation, which would have been a fun thing to do. Maybe if I still have a few minutes at the end, we can do some deep breathing or guided meditation, but things to help you relax when you're trying to fall asleep or if you wake up in the middle of the night. It also, again, teaches you what to do if your brain is kind of, you know, telling you things that aren't really helpful when you're trying to sleep. So these kinds of techniques can be helpful for anybody. One of the specific things that CBT for insomnia does that may or may not be helpful for everybody is that it cuts down on the amount of time that somebody stays in bed so that they start to become really efficient at sleeping. So instead of lying in bed for 10 hours and only sleeping for 7 hours, now you're only in bed for 7 hours if you're only sleeping 7 hours. And it can be a little bit rough for some people. So for some kids, that might not be a great way to go. For some people, again, with the disorders that can affect sleep, like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, any sort of movement disorder, you may not want to do that. But those other techniques should be good for kids, for adults, for just about anybody. Let me know if you have any kind of a follow-up to that. So there was a question about using a light box. I would check with your doctor about that. Because I'd be speaking a little bit out of turn on that. I wouldn't recommend using a light box. So the question was when you should use a light box. Your doctor, just like I would recommend talking to a doctor about, so that I'm not kind of practicing outside of my scope. Just like I would talk to a medical doctor about using melatonin, I would talk with them about whether a light box is right for you. But I can say that I wouldn't want to use it late at night because, again, that's going to be stimulating you. Around the time that I would stop using caffeine, you know, which is maybe 4, 5, 6 hours before you're going to bed. If you're going to bed at 10, you shouldn't be drinking coffee at 8. I wouldn't use a light box at 8. So that can be especially, you know, useful in the morning or during the day to let you know that it's daytime. So I hope that's helpful. And just there was a clarification about going to bed a little bit later in preparation for daylight savings time. It's kind of a weak recommendation, which is that it may be helpful. It may be helpful to just kind of acclimate a little bit to daylight savings time by going to bed a little bit later. That's mostly going to be if you're the kind of person who has a strict bedtime. Just like anybody who's traveled knows that they say east is least and west is best. So when you're going to, say, California, it's a lot easier to stay up 3 hours later and then hopefully wake up a little bit later than it is to try to go to sleep 3 hours earlier. That's almost impossible. So it's not going to be that difficult for you probably to you know, get used to the time change in terms of, you know, that 1 hour. But it might be helpful to just start to go to bed, you know, the few days ahead of time, a few days a week, to just start shifting your schedule so that it's not, you know, the whole 1 hour right then. There was a question about how much TV is too much TV. I'm gonna kind of pull back from that one because that's maybe a little bit outside of the scope of sleep. But again, what I'll say is that in general for sleep, it's going to be most helpful to not be using any electronics in the hour or two before you're going to sleep. And there's actually kind of two parts to that. So one is the actual light that tells your body that it's daytime. And the other part of that is just that in, say, the hour or two before bedtime, it's better if you can do things that are really low key. If you're watching, you know, Die Hard or a horror movie, because whatever, it's October. If you're watching things like that right before you're trying to go to sleep, you're not getting your brain into a nice and restful place. So my recommendation for better sleep is if you can take that hour ahead of time to an hour or two to take a bubble bath, do the dishes, things that are a little bit boring, or, you know, things that that are kind of helping your brain wind down rather than wind up. If you are going to be on your phone, most phones have a mode called nighttime mode, and what that does is it shifts the light. It doesn't just turn the light down, but it actually shifts the kind of light that's coming out into sort of more of a reddish kind of light. And for most people, that's less stimulating for the brain. So if you are going to go ahead and use it anyways, because it's incredibly difficult to stop using electronics, I strongly recommend it. But for those of you who just aren't gonna, at the least, I'm going to recommend shifting your electronics into nighttime mode an hour or two before you're going to sleep. What else? Any other questions? Just gonna sit here with my green tea. Okay, well, it looks like we are out of questions. So, you know what? I'm just going to do a bonus breathing exercise with everybody. For anybody who's stuck with me this long, oh, just another quick question. Is a cup of chamomile tea each night too much? I like chamomile tea. Chamomile tea is herbal. Chamomile tea is actually something that's often recommended to help people fall asleep. So a nice herbal tea that has no caffeine. So a lot of people actually incorporate chamomile tea into their nighttime ritual to help them fall asleep. So again, oh, and one other question. This is a great question. Can you speak to why sleep changes when we age? That's a great question. And the answer is not really. You're right that it does. Sleep does change when we age. As we get older, sleep becomes worse, and that's unfortunate. Sometimes people have a harder time falling asleep, but a lot of people notice a harder time staying asleep. For some people, that's just because of biological needs. You have to wake up to use the bathroom a little bit more often, but also just the way that your body and brain changes. Most people notice their sleep isn't as restorative. And there's a few different phases of sleep. So there's REM sleep that most people know about. That's where you dream, but there's different phases of sleep. And as you age, you start to spend a different amount of time in those different stages. So that is to say that if you're noticing changes in sleep as you age, you're not wrong. And I'm sorry. That's all I got. It's not as good for me as it used to be, and as we go on, it's just not going to be as good. That doesn't mean that you'll never have a good sleep again. It just means that you may notice that you don't need as much sleep, and you may notice that you have to take more extra measures to try to make your sleep as good as it was when you were in your 20s. So for just a moment, I am just going to do a quick bonus breathing exercise for anybody who's stuck with me. This is the easiest breathing exercise that I have, and it's kind of my go-to because you can do it just, again, to speak to the bear. If you're being attacked by a bear, one of the things that'll happen is you start hyperventilating. You need more oxygen. If you want to turn off that part of your brain, that part of your body saying, right now I'm stressed, I'm scared, there's something I need to attack, one of the things you can do is actually force stop your body by doing some deep breathing. If you're breathing deeply and slowly, you are telling your body that there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be stressed about. So deep breathing is something that you can do just during the day if you're anxious or scared. But it's also something that you can do at night if you're noticing that your thoughts are kind of racing, or if you just need to wind down your body. This forces your body into sleep mode. So what I like to do, and people will find different breathing rhythms that work for them. And what I'm about to do with you may or may not work for you. If you're finding that you're trying this and you're uncomfortable, don't do it. Breathe faster, breathe slower, do something that's comfortable for you. But what I like to do, just as kind of an intro, is breathing in for a count of 3, holding for a count of 3, and breathing out for a count of 3. So I'm just going to do that with everybody for just a few breaths. I'd like people to try it and just see if they notice any changes in their body or if they notice any changes in the way the brain is working. So go ahead and breathe in with me. So breathe in, hold, breathe out, 2, 3. Breathe in, 2, hold, breathe out. Breathe in, hold, breathe out. Breathe in, hold, breathe out. So go back to breathing as you were, but for me, that's something that I like to do just anytime I notice that I need to relax, anytime I want to take my thoughts off of whatever my brain is doing and find something else to focus on. Or if it's nighttime, I need to get to sleep, I'll do a little bit of breathing like that to try to get myself into a sleep mode. So If there's no other questions, I'm going to wait for 30 seconds more to see if anything else comes up, but I want to thank everybody. Oh, and let me just go, that is me. So I just want to thank everybody for coming in and participating in this talk. I hope it was helpful for everybody. I hope that you learned something about sleep. I hope you learned something about your mood. I hope you know what you should be looking out for, and have some ideas of what you can do if you feel like things could go a little bit better for you. All right, somebody said stay safe and well. I'm doing my best. My baby's got coronavirus. It has invaded my house, so we're just gonna keep our fingers crossed. I'm so glad that I was healthy today for all of you. I hope that the rest of you do stay healthy, stay safe, stay well, sleep well, have a good mood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
everybody,
you.
take care.
Thank you.